Location, 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 location. It's something that you may have heard once or twice in a movie or something like that, and that's kind of where I remember it from. But what does that mean? Location, location, location. Well, right now we're going to talk about the top 10 best locations. We're just going to call them areas for right now. I just needed that as like a segue. But the top 10 best areas in Monster Hunter. Well, favorite. Let's not say best next, because someone's in the comments right now. Well, actually, Dak. But yeah, top 10 favorite areas in Monster Hunter. So to start it off real nice, we're going to look at the dunes. Now the dunes in this particular selection is going to be the dunes nighttime variant that you'd have to actually first be played in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, or 4 if you will. Now I believe the dunes is a remake of the first generation desert area, but we're going to focus on the 4th gen because I want it to be nighttime, and a couple of things that added in the 4th gen is what sticks out to me. So first and foremost, the atmosphere to this area, the way it looks, the way it feels, everything about it, the way that the level itself just really exudes what it's honestly full on about, just nighttime in the desert. Now usually in the desert you need a cold drink because it's hot outside. Well, I don't know if you guys know real life, mathematics if you will, but deserts are actually pretty cold at night, so that's why you need the hot drink instead. Outside of that, there are a lot of really cool unique areas within this one singular map. I think that's the real thing that makes these maps so good for the rest of this list here, is that a lot of the areas themselves, the individual areas, the map areas, like area 1, 7, 5, 9, and I think 3. I like all these areas. They're super cool, and they tell a different story, if you will. It shows you that the map is quite varied in and of itself. I mean, a lot of maps, they tend to kind of have the same cut and dry, real boring kind of stuff, but other ones, they have really unique features, like why do I never go to this area on the map? And then you go there and it's like, man, there's whole lot going on. Like, we all know about the sand waterfall in this area. That area is dope, because not only you're battling the monster that's there, you're battling the small monsters that are there, the sliding and slipping, if you will, of the sand if you get trapped up in it, and then if you do slip and slide a little bit too much, you fall off and go to another area. It's just a really cool area, quite dynamic to say the least. So for the most part, Dunes, it really gets this spot by being as dynamic as it is for a game that is as old as it is. Coming up next is the single most enraging map for me, and you're wondering why it's on my most favorites list. Well, when I'm not mad trying to figure out where the heck I am by being on this map, this is probably the singular most beautiful map. It's one of the singular most beautiful maps in Monster Hunter, and I speak no hyperbole when I talk about Jungle. Now, funnily enough, it's literally just called Jungle. Usually these map names that have like some kind of, more pizzazz in the naming structure, but it's just Jungle. I mean, it is just the jungle, but it's very, very, very beautiful. Every single individual area in this map is just drop dead beautiful. And it was made at a time where Monster Hunter was a game where it wasn't really about knocking down all the trees and all the foliage that way you could just see the monster very clear. They wanted you to really believe that you were in a place that was probably more real. I mean, heck, they moved away from this and didn't really get deep back into it until the 5th generation with Monster Hunter World, where you had foliage and grassland and everything all over the place. But this was probably the last time they really put their foot into it when they did it. And Jungle from the 2nd generation is fantastic because of it. Not only does it have the same delicious issue of the fact that every area is just beautiful in and of itself, each area itself is also quite unique. Now, depending on what monsters you fight here as well, some dynamic things can happen on top of that. For example, you fight Kush here, it's always raining when you're fighting Kush at whatever area in which you're fighting Kush in. So that's actually really dope too. Outside of that, I like to say that when it comes down to jungle maps or foresty kind of maps, this one's probably my favorite because it just really gets the whole thing down, like you're just lost in this massive forest. If anything, is in my opinion the precursor to that of the ancient forest, where in which you get lost all the time and it's incredibly dense with foliage and whatnot. Now, the vast amount of monsters you're able to fight here as well is actually super cool and quite unique. A lot of water-based monsters, and a lot of ones you particularly would find in this particular area, like Kutku, Garuga, so on, Kongala, you know, the ones you would think would be in a jungle type area. So the monster variation is very unique. The beauty aspect to this map is almost unmatched, and it's just dope. The next area that we are going to discuss is the deserted island. Made its debut in the 3rd generation. Truth be told, it was probably the greatest introductory area to exist in all of Monster Hunter. I've played lots of Monster Hunter, guys. I went back and played one that I did miss, say for some of the 2nd generation stuff, but nevertheless I got to see them again and more revised versions. However, I still like to think that the deserted island is probably the greatest introductory area in all of Monster Hunter. It was just one of those maps where every single area was a place to fight. You know how there's certain places when you go to a map and you're like, man, I really hate fighting X monster in Y area, you know? Whereas the case in Deserted Island, that's never the case. I can't think of a single place where you would come to fisticuffs with a monster that I didn't enjoy. I enjoy fighting in there's no monster that fight in the very first area, but area 2, area 3, nothing fought in 4. I think 4 is a weird one, but 5, I think 4, essentially every area, save for the very, very first area, is an area where you can fight a monster. And I don't mind fighting any monster in any of those areas whatsoever. Mind you, when I'm speaking, I'm talking of the 3rd generation variant, where in which they had in Generations, they did have this map, but they added ledges, and nothing got better by you adding ledges to them, especially when there weren't any ledges. Also, they took away the underwater combat, which got rid of, I think, 2 additional areas. Or, yeah, at least 2 additional areas, well, 2.5 areas, let's say that. You still got, I think, area 10, but it's only on land and no underwater. Nevertheless, it is not only gorgeous, it has the most open and I wouldn't call it varied. It's not very varied. It's the most open and easy to actually battle areas in my opinion, all of Monster Hunter. I do like how they had the underwater combat. It allowed you to actually do so if you felt the need to do so. And when a certain occasional aquatic monsters made their appearance there, like Gaiacris, Plesioth, Gobel was there at one point when you do the Moga Village offline stuff, but so many different monsters you can fight there, and the environment itself was just easy to navigate. You never really got lost. It had tons of resources, so let's say you're fighting a monster and you run out of potions or something, you can easily make more, things like that. It was very self-sustained, and it was just an all-around great map. In my opinion, a straight-up benchmark. It is the litmus test on what beginner areas in a Monster Hunter game should be. The 4th generation brought with it a lot of interesting things. Some of them, a majority of them rather, I don't like. However, the one thing I do like the absolute most is the Heaven's Mount. Now, Heaven's Mount is a very popular map. A lot of people like this map for good reason. It's one of those maps where you look at and you're like, you know what? This is everything about the 4th generation in one single map. There was a lot of verticality into it. There was a lot of real interesting areas. There was a lot of great ledges you can jump off of. Not forced ledges. Whereas they went back and remastered old maps, those ledges were forced. You can kind of feel they didn't really fit with the geometry of the map. Where in which these ledges, they feel more natural. It's like, okay, you're on a cliff face in certain parts. You're on a mountain, the Heaven's Mount. So there's certain craggy areas where there's gonna be gaps in between, allowing you to actually leap. Okay, so it fits. It legitimately fits. Now, what I like so much about it, on top of the verticality that it gives, all the varied areas, when you really think about it, it's actually quite the varied location. I want to say it's probably a segment off of some kind of ruined temple or something like that, because there's certain sections that they don't really fit with other sections, as if it was an amalgamation of different points in like a timeline, so to speak, like different periods, or like two different mountains clashing together, where you have certain sections where it's like, okay, this is clearly looks like a mountain like this. Then there's other parts where the foliage is different, the coloring is way off. It's just like it's really dark and gloomy on this side, but it's really bright and vibrant on that side. And then there's like a really like almost like a forest kind of thing. It's so like all over the place. So either it's, in my opinion, like a mix of different biomes within one on a mountain, or I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I don't really know exactly what's happening. It just looks cool. Normally when you do things like this, it looks bad, but in this case, it looks great. Okay, the environment itself looks good. The skybox is amazing. The level design in terms of the verticality, where in which you have to fight certain monsters, like the Celtis Queen, where you fight the Celtis Queen, that area, you know what area I'm talking about. It's dope. Zinogre's spawn area, that's sick. The area where Devil Joe likes to hang out at, that's sick. At the very, very, very top of the mountain, there's a nest where you usually will find your Rathian and your Rathalos and so on and so forth. But on that nest, like depending on what attacks are being done on it, the whole nest itself will shift from side to side, almost like a seesaw. Really great in that design, quite dynamic. It's the epitome of what the 4th generation maps should have been, where it's wild, it's fun, you enjoy just looking at it. There's runes in the background. It's everything, okay? It's literally everything. And a lot of the monsters you fight here are some of the upper echelon monsters, so you will come here quite a few times to tangle with some big fish. Let the record show that I love desert areas. There's 3 on this list, so prepare for that. Nevertheless, here's the second one. I love the Wildspire Waste. From the very moment I saw it, I knew that this was going to be it for me. The first time I played the Monster Hunter the Monster Hunter World Beta, I was like, wow, so I get to be in the desert area and I get to fight Barrett and Diablos and so forth. But the thing that really got me was just walking around, looking at everything. It's a mix of biomes wrapped into one. You have the small forested area, you have the swamplandish type of area, you have some cave networks, and then you have the desert itself. It's so grand. It works. You know, it has all these things, but it works together. It meshes so perfectly. And the beauty to it all is the fact that on this new 5th gen engine, this whole next gen, if you will, everything feels more realistic. It's almost as if they had an ability for you to just like view the map and just watch the game be a game and just enjoy like nature, it would be, in my opinion, the best one to do so. Desert nature, desert wildlife is probably the coolest out there. And when you add monsters in there, it really definitely piques my interest. So it's really cool just seeing all the endemic, if you will, creatures do as they please. So from a gameplay standpoint, what I really like about this area is that it is so seamless. I know that's literally all of what world is, but that's literally it. Now, you won't see too many world maps on this list, but the ones that I do put on here, they're going to be the ones that do the seamless thing 100% perfect to things that I really like. This is the top favorites list. And the way they implemented the forested area into the desert, and the desert area into the swampland, and the swampland into the cave networks, that kind of thing works so well because it's not stark. It's not unbelievable. It's quite believable. I can believe that there's certain parts of the desert, like a savanna type area, where there's trees and relative normal foliage, and after that it flattens out to like a whole barren wasteland. But then again, if you go down under, you'll find cave networks with a bit of water, you know, things like that. Like, it's just, that makes sense. That's like a real thing. And this map really encapsulates all of that beauty, that wonder, that magic. It's a very, very well put together map, and Capcom really did their best in doing so for this one right here. Okay, so let's double back and do another 5th generation area. Now we're going to look at the Rotten Vale. Now the Rotten Vale is absolutely, and like, wow, it is an amazing location. There isn't a single person I know who looks at this level and thinks to themselves, you know, it's kind of bland, it's not fun, it's not cool. By far and large, it's the most unique area to exist in Monster Hunter. because one of the Coral Highlands does technically kind of exist, but it exists due in part to the Rotten Vale because all the death and decay that is in the Rotten Vale leads to life that is given through the Coral Highlands. So it's kind of like you need this festering bleh, and then on top of the festering bleh is the Coral Highlands where all the juice comes from. Now let's talk about what all the death and stuff is. The Rotten Vale is a dead, diseased, dying, decaying landscape, and little monsters live there. The only ones who do live there, they themselves are quite hardy and aren't affected by the natural effluvia or whatever, effluvium. That's just kind of just naturally, perpetually just kind of sitting there. It's like a toxic kind of gas that can turn most monsters, weaker monsters, lesser monsters, into basically like cancer, like just a giant walking living tumor cancer thing. It's just incredible. There's 3 levels to it. You have like the upper level, the medium level, and like the bottom area where all the acid pools are, which is pretty sick. The acid pools there due in part to, I think, is Dalamadur. There's a dead Dalamadur in there, and like I guess all the toxins from his body just made like pools and pools of acid, and really the only monster kind of lived down inside of there is the Vale, and Vale is one of my favorite monsters of the 5th generation. So it's kind of cool that he himself just kind of lays in the absolute bottom of all this nastiness. But in the middle areas where all the action really happens, where we see most of the monsters like Great Gyros and Odog. When you see Odog and whatnot, Radabon is there too. But I mean, the monster variety is pretty cool. It's the fact that the monsters who do live there, they themselves are so part and parcel to the environment. They literally look like death. You know, they look like death and disease and decay. And to actually successfully make a map that's 100% death, disease, and decay is just so cool that they were able to even do. They were even able to do that. So I am going to 100% give a shout out to Capcom for even having the ability to make a map like this, make an area like this. I just have to give it to them. This is probably one of the unique and coolest locations like ever. And there's no one who's gonna sit there and argue against that with me. You know why it's here, and that's exactly why it's so dope. The Frozen Seaway is the absolute best tundra-based area in all of Monster Hunter. You flat out cannot change my opinion on this. There's a reason why, I don't even know what the place in Iceborne is called. I forget what it's called, but there's a reason why that area isn't even on this list. It's not. If you're thinking, oh, Dak hasn't put on here yet, it's not on this list. Okay, it's not. I'm looking at the script right here. It's not on the list, okay? It's not. Frozen Seaway is the best tundra area in all of Monster Hunter. There isn't a single tundra-based area that has a landscape as incredibly dope as this one. Mind you, when I say things like isn't any like this map ever, blah, 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 I mean base main series games. Frontier is a place that's very weird. And now we're not going to go there, and I'm never going to make a Frontier-based video. Don't ask. Okay, never say never, but for the most part, for the foreseeable future, don't ask. Okay, I don't know anything about Frontier at all. Maybe there might be a map better than this one, but as it stands right now, main series games, Frozen Seaway is incredible. On top of the fact that it just looks like a place that it looks like a scary place. Honestly, it really genuinely looks like a scary place. I like to think of it as probably an incredibly inhabited location, like somewhere along the lines of like, I don't know, like the polar ice caps or something like that, because I just get this vibe that you're nowhere even close to civilization. However, we have a job to do and we are out here. So that kind of gives me the vibe. On top of the fact that the Frozen Seaway itself is quite vertical, there's a few areas in which there are caverns, so monsters like Kezu can actually make an appearance in there. Kezu's a terrible monster, so we're not going to talk about Kezu, but we're going to talk about monsters like Gameth and Kush La Diora, how Kush himself has a shedded skin of himself at like the tippy top up there. That's kind of cool whenever they add that dynamic to let you know that, hey, other monsters are actually here, even though they're not technically physically here at this point in time right now. That's cool to let you know that this monster once or currently calls this place its home. Speaking of monster that calls this place its home, probably the first time I even saw this area was when you had to go fight the Zamtrails, who of which I was not really certain to think that he'd be a monster who would fit here, but he 100% fits here. He's an ice water monster, a shark type monster if you will, and to actually have an area where there are shifting, like I want to say like, what do you call them? Shifting sheets of ice in like a frozen lake that he himself inhabits. That's freaking dope. If any one singular map I would have full on wanted a 5th generation remake, this is 100% one of the ones right here. Flat out, bar none. It is just, it's beautiful on the eyes. The skybox is impeccable. The atmosphere is off the charts. All the actual location you can fight monsters on is really cool. So you can fight on the side of that huge sloping area where you fight Lagambi and Gamut. That's super cool. There's a howling blizzard right where Kush likes to go to sleep. Places like this are just like some of the best in all of Monster Hunter, bar none. Yes, even Frontier. Last desert area map, I promise. So we have the Sandy Plains, the desert area of that in the 3rd generation. It's a beautiful place. Honestly, it's one of those areas where I just have, I'm gonna give it to you real. This is nostalgia for me. Like when you compare it to the areas like the Wildspire Waste and heck, even the dunes, it isn't too much better in a lot of regards. A lot of things I can say to those areas can be applicable to the same one here. There are different sets of biomes in one that appear in this one. You have like a kind of swampish area where the bear like to hang out. Not a relative grassland, but there's some grassier type areas. There's cave extensions. These kind of things also take part in the Sandy Plains. There's also the giant sandy plain, if you will. There's 2 of them. Nevertheless, so the coolest thing about it is like a lot of the monsters I really like take root here. Diablos, one of my favorite monsters, period, takes this place for his/her home. Sandberry, which is one of the most controversial, in my opinion, subspecies of all time, make this place's area. Nibble Snarf, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of actual really cool monsters to fight here. So that's really cool. You get to fight monsters like Great Jag here as well. So it's a monster, it's the area you get to see very early on to still fight some of these earlier monsters. The same with like Core, Peko, and also Bear. So a lot of monsters make their home here, and you will come to this area quite a few times. That's probably why I found it so fun, because a lot of varied monsters call this place their home. So many different monster types come here, so you get to actually feel all that this map has to give. It's quite a robust map as well as far as deserts go, and to be frank, yeah, Wildspire Waste does literally what this map does better, but this map was first, and I did say this was nostalgia speaking. So honestly, I'm not gonna be beating around the bush. You can take basically everything that I did say about Wildspire Waste and just apply it here. It's just another good map. It has lots of varied biomes, lots of varied monsters, incredibly cool looking skyboxes. It has incredible music, okay? This is one of the few maps I actually really like the music to. It's just an all around great map. My favorite part about this map though is when you're in the area, I forget the main area, but you jump down into a ravine, and you're in like a real darkened area where you see, if you look up, you see like, I wouldn't call them like sand waterfalls because they're sand, but it'd be like sand pouring in from the ceiling and things like that. It's a cooler area. There's like ruins of some lost civilization there. A lot of monsters go there to sleep. It's just a really fun spot. I mean, I can't even sit here and pretend for it not to be as cool as it actually is. And for the final area on this list, pause right now. I know what you're gonna say, but Dak, how is it the final area on the list when you said this was the top 10 and this is literally only number 2 as opposed to number 1? Well, viewers, I couldn't think of 10, so we're gonna leave it at 9, and I'm putting this one at number 2 because I know that there's a map somewhere that is probably better than this one. I say that because as much as I love this map, it just doesn't feel like the greatest, dopest map of all time to me, and I'm reserving judgment for another map later on. When will that come out? I don't know, but as it stands, this will be number 2 as opposed to number 1. So if you've made it this far, congratulations! You get to call me out on this video not actually being a top 10, but if you didn't, you'll never know! Anyway, Flooded Forest. It is every good thing I've ever said about every map on this list. Flooded Forest, okay? 100% Flooded Forest. My favorite thing to do in Monster Hunter in general is to fight monsters underwater. This is a map where you can do literally that in 1, 2, 3, 4 areas. Gives me 4 places to fight. I have to count in my head and out loud, of course. I don't really script these, and I'm not editing this out. This is what it is. You get to fight underwater monsters in underwater segments, and I think it believes up to 4 different underwater areas. That's dope. You get to be in a rainforest where it's raining perpetually, and you get to see how all that actually works well with the environment itself. I mean, when you're in a rainforest, you want to see lush, dense foliage, and you get to see lush, dense foliage. You can almost feel the environment as you're just walking through the areas, let alone when you just go in swimming underwater. It's dark, murky waters where you see certain monsters like the Gobel who like to call that place home because they themselves are ambush type monsters. They themselves can't really just blend in with all the bright colors and whatnot, so they use the murky depths of the water as camouflage on top of its lure to get its food. Now, that extends to the gameplay itself. The visibility in these particular underwater segments aren't the best, and it's just so great. On top of that, everything else, literally everything I've ever said that's good about maps ever goes in here. You have cave segments, you have underwater segments, you have the main the main area that itself has an incredibly dope skybox. It has ruins from like an ancient civilization in there. They have hidden areas, little small nooks and crannies you can kind of get into. I think there's 5 underwater segments you fight monsters in. Doesn't matter. The monster variety is pretty varied as well. You'll fight Durambros is big ass in here. Deviljo will make an appearance in there. Korapeko, Raytheon, Nargacuga, Ivory, Lagiacrus, regular Lagiacrus. So many different monsters can come here, and you'll fight a grand amount of them as well. And it's an early location you get to come to, so if you've never really been here, then you've not really gotten at least to the Royal Ludroth, because he's an early monster and you actually do see him here quite often, as well as like the Great Roggy and certain monsters like that. So the monster variety is incredible. The actual visibility of the game, or of the area, the fact that it looks as great as it does, is a huge bonus. The lore, like the lore, the thing that makes you want to come and play on this map, is grand. Okay, it's amazing. There's nothing bad I have to say about this map, but it's not my favorite. And with that being said, everyone, it's been your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself. What do you think of a video like this? This was one that was sitting on my pen and pad for a while. A top 10 areas video, top 10 locations, if you will. Yes, we only made 9, but nevertheless, it doesn't matter. It's a list of a bunch of locations that are really dope that I found to be really nice. This is my favorites list. And with that said, let me know what your favorite areas are to fight, and your favorite areas in just Monster in general, and I'll see you on the next one. With that being said, it's been your boy Dak908. Take care.